Battle of Waxhaws was fought on May 29, 1780 near the South Carolina and North Carolina border and would become known as Buford's Massacre. American troops under the command of Abraham Buford were retreating into North Carolina after failing to reach Charleston to aid in the defense of the city. Clinton and Cornwallis would dispatch Bannister Tarleton and the British Legion to hunt them down and defeat them in battle. These were the last of the American Continentals in the South, and their defeat would be a huge blow to American morale and recruiting efforts. Tarleton only had about 150 men with him, and Buford had about 450, almost 500 men. Buford declined a demand of surrender from Tarleton, and the two sides lined up for battle. Most of the American troops had never been in battle before and were tired from their long march south and now their march north. Tarleton ordered his men to charge the Americans, and he led the charge from the front with his dragoons himself. The Americans barely got off a shot before they started running away. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding what happened next, but according to accounts of soldiers who fought in the battle, the Americans threw up the white flag of surrender and the British began rounding up the prisoners. Suddenly, a shot rang out and Tarleton was pinned under his horse, having it shot out from under him. His bodyguard assumed he had been killed, and his troops began killing the Americans for breaking the truce. It was a complete massacre, and most of the American soldiers were unarmed at this point, but were still killed in brutal ways. When Tarleton regained consciousness, he condemned the officers who ordered the charge, and the surviving Americans would be given medical aid by the British before being sent to Charleston. The cry of Tarleton's Quarter became the rally cry of American patriots in the backcountry and made the Civil War in the South even more violent as patriots wanted revenge for the killings. After the Battle of Waxhaws, the British would turn their efforts towards recruiting loyalists for the British Army and training them for the upcoming campaign. Meanwhile, the Continental Congress was struggling to fit a new Continental Army to oppose the British in the South. They would ultimately raise an army and give command of this army to General Horatio Gates, the hero of Saratoga. Washington was livid. Gates had stolen credit for Saratoga from General Benedict Arnold and Daniel Morgan, and he saw Gates as an inferior commander who would bring utter destruction to the Continental Army. Congress would stand firm on their man, and Gates would march south with his army to oppose the British. They would meet at the Battle of Camden, where Gates decided to deploy his militia fresh from North Carolina against the British's best infantry, which was a recipe for disaster. The Americans would be humiliated in another open field battle that didn't even last more than an hour, and Gates would actually outrun most of his men. Once again, the Americans had no Continental Army in South Carolina, and the British, it seemed, were going to march right through North Carolina and into Virginia. By taking Charleston, South Carolina, the British now had a strong foothold in the southern colonies. General Sir Henry Clinton quickly dispatched many detachments of British infantry and dragoon units into the backcountries to recruit locals to join the British ranks, as well as secure loyalty from towns and officials. Clinton decided to return to New York, and he would turn over reins of the campaign to Lord Charles Cornwallis, who had just returned from mourning his wife's death in England. Charles Cornwallis was a capable commander and was known as one of the finest in the British Army at the time, and it was seen that if anyone could get the campaign done, it would be him. The British started meeting fierce resistance, though, from local populations, and it quickly became apparent that there was a civil war brewing in South Carolina between patriots and loyalists. There would be many skirmishes fought in the Carolinas between loyalists and patriots, and in South Carolina alone, there would be over 130 battles fought where there wasn't a single British soldier in sight. It truly was a civil war. You would see town versus town, brother versus brother, family versus family. And the main goal of all of this was exacting revenge on past grudges. And many people also saw this as an opportunity to expand their wealth and land. The British were not accustomed to dealing with civil wars, especially ones as contested as this, so many of the British officers actually made things worse when they tried to intervene in these local squabbles as they saw them.